All right.
Okay.
We're ready to go.
Let's do it.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Odum and Andrea show. I am the host, Odum, with, I don't know what to say there, along with my beautiful wife, Andrea. And in this podcast, we talk about people that do really cool and interesting shit, and people that inspire us to want to do cool and interesting shit in our lives as well, too. And today, we're going to talk about this book called, actually, I don't know if this is what it's called. I think it's called The Fear Bubble by Ant Middleton. I thought it was Ant Middleton. This guy looks like Jason Momoa. This guy's pretty intense. Look at this.
Yeah. He's pretty.
Put that up there.
This guy's pretty intense.
Is that focusing? I think so. It looks.
Yeah,
this is intense.
Yeah.
So it says harness fear and live without limits, which is pretty interesting. And it's interesting to something that we were talking about this morning, something that I was thinking about just while even getting ready for the podcast that I want to put to your attention. But that's secret stuff for later on, maybe. Anyway, I'm
intrigued.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I'm pretty excited. It's nothing new, really. Stuff that we've kind of always been talking about of how we want to go, what we want to do for our next adventure. Reading all these books and doing these podcasts have really kind of, at least for me, lit the fire to get going and doing something fun and adventurous. So
absolutely.
So yeah, I don't know. That's why we do these podcasts. If anything, they're hopefully entertaining for you.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, if you like our podcast and anything that we do, you can check us out on our website, odumandandrea.com, where we have all of our past podcasts up as well for you to listen to and enjoy. And with that, let's take it away to the fear bubble. The fear bubble.
All right.
There's lots of. Anyways, what? Okay, go ahead. I was like, I have questions. So many questions. I haven't even heard about this.
Let's pump the brakes.
All right.
Okay. So I think his full name is actually Anthony Middleton, but everybody just calls him Ant, I guess. I think maybe it's like a little bit of like a nickname as well, because he's not a big guy. Like he's not super tall. Like he's a big guy,
but
he's not like.
Have you seen this guy?
Yeah. But he's not super tall. He's not super tall, and he's actually our age. He was born in 1980. So he grew up he was born in England, and his background. We'll go through his background first, and then I'll tell you about the book. So he grew up. In Britain. He was born in Britain. This one is kind of weird because he was born in Britain, and then his dad suddenly died when when Ant was 6 years old. His dad was actually 36, so his dad died in 1985.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, his mom was dating this other guy, and then took the insurance money and moved them to this huge property in France.
Right.
He doesn't really talk too much about that.
Suspicious.
But that seems suspicious to me. Like,
sure.
What happened there? I don't know.
Anyways, this is I can't speak to it.
I was just like, oh, that's really weird. So.
Anyways.
Yeah. So they moved there.
You've been watching too much Dexter. We've been rewatching Dexter, and there's the one that's towards the end, Hannah McKay. She's the poisoner. It's like every time you're eating, you never know if what's going to be in there. Yeah. If it's your last bite. Anyways. Yeah. Too much Dexter.
So he has, part of that when his dad died, it was like all of a sudden they weren't allowed to talk about his dad at all. They weren't allowed to go to the funeral. They weren't allowed.
So who's they? Does he have brothers and sisters?
Yeah. So he has three brothers.
Okay. Younger, older?
Younger and older.
Okay. So he's somewhere in the middle.
He's somewhere in the middle. So he wasn't allowed. They weren't allowed to talk about their dad. They weren't allowed to grieve their dad at all. They weren't allowed to go to the funeral. They weren't allowed to talk about his dad's family. Like, it was basically like, no, we're done.
Completely cut off.
That
seems weird.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I think
that's more than weird. That's just
which is why I'm saying, like,
not how you handle
stuff,
the death in the family,
right? So eventually, he turns 17, and then he wants to go to the army. His life was pretty tough with his mom. His mom and his stepdad. His stepdad sounds like he was not a really great guy, like not a nice guy. And so because they had this beautiful big plot of land in France, I think that was maybe like the only redeeming thing there.
That's where they moved after they got the money,
the insurance money. And so
were they well off before this insurance money?
I don't think so.
But what did he do to have such a big insurance?
I don't know. He doesn't talk that much. That's why I'm like, there's like a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah. Because even insurance, I mean,
yeah.
we just looked it up for me. Like, you know, my insurance, if anything happens, it's like 300,000. Don't do anything like that.
Don't tell me those numbers.
But yeah, we should get some more insurance actually.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I don't get into the financial stuff. But
so he says part of why I wanted to join the army was to recreate those experiences of wild adventure under open skies. However, he goes into the army when he's 17. So this is 1998. And it's like not what he expected. It's a lot more of what like he was dealing with his stepdad. Like, you're not good enough. And
like the army?
Yeah. So he just wasn't having like the greatest time. So
well, I mean, that's kind of the purpose of the army, though. It's not going to be an easy go.
Yeah,
they want to
I know, but
soldiers.
I think he had like a different expectation of it. So,
well, you see movies and TV shows, and you think it's going to be this fun time or whatever, and you know, it's tough. It's not easy.
Yeah. So he ends up as part of the army. One of the things that they do is they do like a climb up. It's called Snowdon Mountain. And actually, I'm pretty sure that mountain was one of the mountains that Ash Dykes did a bunch of training on as well.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah. So, but it was like when he was climbing up, he realized like he had to make a choice at one point, and there was people like turning around and like going back down because they didn't want to go up to the top of this mountain because it's the biggest one in England at 3,500 feet.
Yeah, that's
so
not that high, but
it's not Everest. So, but it's like,
but you can just hike it though.
No, I don't know. I think it's. He said like he said he realized like he was like on the edge of death, and he never felt of like it was the first time he felt like real vulnerability. Like
real fear.
If he made like one bad decision, like he was gonna go down. But I think that also for him was like really important because he knew like it was all in his hands. That kind of like control was all in his hands. Right. And so I think that was kind of the first time he realized like you can listen to that fear telling you that you're going to fall and you're going to die, or you can choose to ignore it and then move forward and find out what you're really made of kind of thing. So that's what he does talk about that as like an instrumental.
But I could also manage to or believe that fear really can help you focus, especially a near-death experience or fear of death can really be like, okay, you know what? It's almost like it makes you aware of the preciousness of life.
100%.
And that you if something does happen to you or you're close to death, you're like, you know what? I have to make sure that every day I have to live to the fullest. Yeah. Which is, I think, could be a driving factor for a lot of people that are like action junkies or whatever, that, you know, they want to get that rush of what it's like to just live on the edge, right? Yeah. So anyways, it's very interesting.
So he's in the army for a little while and then he leaves. And then I think he has, again, a little bit of a hard time coming out of the army, trying to figure out what he's going to do with his life. And then he ends up rejoining, but this time he rejoins the Marines. And so this is in 2005. So he's with the Marines for 4 years. He does 2 tours in Afghanistan, and eventually he gets to the point where he's like a special, like in the special forces of the Marines, and he's like one of like the point men, and he's like a sniper, and so he's like pretty high up there with their special operations and stuff like that. So then,
is it any kind of like a special ops team, like a Navy SEALs kind of for sure. But for whatever they have in England,
it is in the UK. Yeah. So they were doing a bunch of like going in. I could be wrong, but like going into like arrest or trying to find some of these in Afghanistan, trying to find some of the terrorists and like arrest them and detain them and whatever. So that's what he was involved with. So he gets out.
Arrested. No waterboarding.
Yeah. So he gets out, but then he has some sort of altercation and he assaults a police officer. And this was in 2013. And he ends up
while he's in the army, he's assaulting a police officer?
He's out of the Marines at this point. He assaults a police officer and he's sentenced to 14 months for assault. He only serves 4 months at this time. And we'll come back to this police assault later because there's some stuff about it. So from there, it looks like he kind of learned his lesson and figured like something needs to turn around.
Learned his lesson of not assaulting police officers.
Or I just think like, because I think alcohol was involved. And I think that was another issue he had in between the army and the Marines was there was some sort of like, there's some alcohol stuff involved. I think he was always getting into like kind of fights and stuff like that.
Addicted.
Well, not addicted, but just like
drinking all the time.
Yeah.
That's kind of...
Yeah, I don't know. He doesn't talk too much about that. But
sure.
So, and then I don't know how this happens, but eventually he gets approached to be on a reality TV show called SAS Who Dares Wins. And
what does the SAS
I don't know what
for?
SAS stands for actually. But basically it's a reality show where it's him and I think there's 2 other kind of like UK military guys, and they are putting their group of recruits through like special forces training, basically like the selection process that you would go through.
But they're just regular people. They're not actually people that want to be in the army.
No, it's just like the people that test themselves, or I think they're like athletes or something like that.
Sure.
There's a couple like celebrity ones, and I don't know any of the people, but they're celebrities in the UK. Sure. So that kind of thing. And so he did that show from 2015 to 2021, and then he did another reality show.
It's a long time.
It's a long time.
Yeah.
So he did another reality show called Mutiny, where he's on a boat. He's recreating this. It was the mutiny of this boat called the Bounty, HMS Bounty, where the crew mutinied and set the captain and like 18 other people off on the boat, and they had to travel like from. It was one of the like the islands around Tahiti, so they were recreating this like like open rowboat thing, and he said it was one of the hardest things he's ever done in his life.
Because he had to be on this boat.
He was on the boat.
Person who got mutinied.
Yeah, exactly.
So they just had to survive.
Yeah. So that was one of the things he did. So he ended up though getting canceled on Twitter when he compared Black Lives Matter to the English Defense League. I don't know too much about this English Defense League, but it sounds like it's kind of like an extremist group. And so he got in trouble for comparing BLM to this extremist group.
Okay.
And so basically the channel that was running SAS dropped him, canceled him. He was done because he made this comment on Twitter.
Right.
So he was kind of like, well, fuck you, England. I'm moving to Australia. So he moved to Australia.
Oh, yeah, that's much better.
Yeah.
Well, this is back in the day, but.
Well, no, it's not back in the day. It's like just like last year.
Oh, this is just last year. Sorry, I thought we were still talking like 2015,
no,
2016.
No. So.
So maybe just back up a little bit here, because there's a lot to you just went over.
Yeah.
So what exactly did he say?
I don't know. I can't find the tweet, but it was something for.
So basically,
it says on his wiki, it says appeared a comment he made on Twitter, which appeared to compare Black Lives Matter protesters with the English Defense League as extremists.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I mean, and then of course, if you do anything like that, you get canceled. And when you canceled, does it mean was his Twitter account suspended?
I don't know.
Or I guess
he was definitely let go.
He lost his job.
Yeah.
Because of comments made on social media, which again is another thing that's completely ridiculous. When you kind of let the mob rule over corporate decisions. But that being said, I mean, probably what he said, I don't know this other organization.
Yeah.
But I do know Black Lives Matter, and I would agree that I am not a fan of that organization as well. The stuff that they do, I mean, look at where the money is flowing. Well, I mean, all the top leaders they're complete frauds, and they're buying multi-million-dollar mansions and houses all over the place. And the violence that carries along with it. It's a lot of the things today in today's society where there is the general idea of a good cause of, hey, we can't treat people badly or whatever, which is, I guess, a good cause in a way. But then the people underneath it use that to hijack a whole completely different movement / agenda or whatever, and create all kinds of trouble and chaos. And then if you say anything about it, it's like people are attacking you for the basis of like, oh, don't you think that black people shouldn't be killed? Like, of course they shouldn't, but that's not the point, right? So it's hiding behind that mask. Yeah. So anyways, not to get into the politics of anything, but for me anyways, I don't see any good redeeming qualities of that organization either. And I would never want to be a part of it. So it's very interesting. Anyways, so that happens. And then he moves to Australia.
Yeah. And then it's
COVID lockdown?
No. In a beautiful fuck you, he goes to one of the channels in Australia. And so now they have SAS Australia who dares wins. And so he's actually, I watched the trailer for it. It looks like no joke, but they have like athletes, like Olympic athletes that are going through
like the obstacles or whatever
obstacles
it is.
and stuff. And it looks like no joke. And so he's on there actually with, like one of the SEALs that I've heard on different podcasts that I listen to. And so that's interesting. So they've only done one season so far. So it just released like 2022.
Oh,
so,
right. Well, that's interesting that they're still doing that. But yeah, I guess what the thing is, if you're not going to want to do the show here, then I'll go do it somewhere else. Yeah. Which is good because a lot of people that get quote unquote canceled, they're like, they have a hard time getting work anywhere. Yeah. Right. But maybe it was just more of a local thing because I never heard of this guy, right? So,
no, neither had I. The only way I kind of knew of him was his two ways. His books came up when I was looking at other books, like as suggested. He came up, and then also I think he did like a quote for Ash Dyke's book as well, or someone else, or even maybe Ross Edgley, because they're all from the UK, right? So I think that's where I've also seen him as well. So,
well, good for him.
Yeah. So he's written a ton of different books. So his first book was called First Man In, and that was like more of like an autobiography about his life. And so the next one he did was this one that I read, was The Fear Bubble. And I'm so sorry about this.
What?
I had no idea that this was what the book was going to be about. But this book takes place in 2018.
This book, The Fear Bubble. Okay.
When he climbed Everest.
Oh, come on. Are you serious?
Yes.
Oh, another Everest book?
We're not, trust me, we're not going to be hardcore into it. Like,
yeah, whatever. That's fine.
Like the 90s.
I mean, what else do we know? We've said everything there is to say.
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just saying.
I'm getting flashbacks to the 98 season.
The 96 season.
Whatever.
So this one,
whatever.
This is like the backdrop for everything he says. But I started reading and I had no idea.
Sorry, right. Because this book doesn't even talk about the stuff that happened in him getting this new TV shows because
no.
Okay.
I just wanted to do a background of him, so we kind
of
so we knew who he was and how he's kind of a fuck you kind of a guy, right? Like he doesn't give a shit.
Yeah, I was just gonna say speak his mind.
Yeah, so I just wanted to put that in context first, but then I was reading it and I was just like, oh my god, Odum's gonna kill me and fuck about Everest. Yeah. So people need to be able to speak their mind. And people should be able to speak their mind and to be able to speak freely, even if, and maybe especially if you don't agree with them. So we're going to get to that. So hold that thought because we're going to get to that because he talks about that in this book. Okay. So he's how he even gets the idea to climb Everest is he's kind of having this like fancy dinner in this like exclusive private club with this lawyer that he meets because he's been on these shows and he does a bunch of different talks and stuff too. He does like speak like so like
this lawyer probably pay to have dinner with him
or I don't know if he was a lawyer, maybe he was just like this big corporate business guy, and so they have this fancy dinner and all he can think about is what would happen if this place just got shot to shit, like what would I do and what would these other people do. And so it's just like, well, that's not a really good way to think, right? And so he gets out and he just realizes like he needs something to like test him, like he's been kind of living this like cushy life of like the TV host and everything.
It's kind of I don't know what this means to you, but it reminds me a little bit of Joe Rogan when he was doing Fear Factor. And he's just like, because you hear him talking about, it's like, I got to get out of here. You're doing Fear Factor. I'm just getting high all the time because the show's so ridiculous. And I just kind of need to.
I think, that's a really good parallel. Yeah, it is interesting. And so he says, in Everest, I'd found the ideal challenge to tame that warrior ghost inside of me.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah.
Sorry. It's like,
so.
This Everest is just.
Yes.
Whatever. Again, kudos to. Like I said, I like his approach of like, I need to challenge myself and I need to do something that is really, I don't know, just very difficult to do that'll really challenge myself and like, whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's different than the other person that's just rich. I need to climb it because I need to tell all my friends that I'm the one who climbed Everest.
So he talks about this too. So we're going to get there. So don't worry. But the one thing is like, so he's reading up on Everest and looking at like the kill rate and everything like that. And
it's like all perfect.
And he's looking at, and he notices George Mallory, who was one of the first British people to try and climb it. They didn't even know if he had gotten to the top. And there was like a huge expedition that went out to try and find his body. But he reads, oh, this guy was 37 when he died on Everest, and that's the same age I am. So let's go get it, kind of thing. So
let's go get his body. Or
no, let's go get it. Like let's go do it, kind of thing. So.
Well, there's been British people, I'm sure, that have climbed to the top at this stage of the game. No.
Oh yeah. But he was like one of the first ones.
Way back in the day.
Yeah.
What's way back in the day? Like the 80s.
The 40s. I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So he says, he talks a little bit about fear, and he says, it's not that I've learned to conquer fear or enjoy it. It's that I've learned how to use it. Fear is like a wild horse. You can let it trample all over you, or you can put a harness on it and let it carry you forwards. Without fear, there's no challenge. Without challenge, there's no growth. Without growth, there's no life. And so I really liked that, because I was like, yeah, you can let it and he talks about letting fear shrink you as a person. And if you let it over consume you, it just makes you smaller and smaller. Mm-hmm. But if you can take that energy and use it to propel you forward, you can take it both ways.
I'd love to talk to you about this. I don't know, now's probably not a good time, but is there any point in your life or our lives that you can go back and say, you know what, we let fear
100%
move this decision?
I know exactly.
Yeah.
Before we got married, both of us didn't know what we wanted to do, and
still don't know.
No, but I even feel like it's just both of us, it's shit or get off the pot. Let's one of us make a decision, and I feel like neither of us were making a decision because we didn't know what the other person wanted to do. So, and then I finally applied for teacher's college because I was like, well, I fucking hate doing this master's. Let's just do the teacher's college. And then I got pregnant. So but so so then he talks, and then he talks about how he deals with fear, and going through being an army commando and having to go and knock down these doors and being the first guy in, and being afraid of and
well, that's a different type of fear, right? That's fear of your life, right?
Of course, but he said he had to learn how to live with it, so he broke it down into small packets, so it wasn't all encompassing. And so I really liked how he talked about how he views fear now, and I'm definitely going to use it, but he says he conceptualizes it as a bubble, and so you can actually the bubble of the fear of when he's going to knock down a door. So that bubble of fear is right by that door, but it's at that time and in that place. It's an actual thing. And he doesn't worry about it or think about it until he gets to that bubble. Because he was saying he was having a hard time when he would come home after a deployment. And then he would relax for a little bit and then start thinking of his next deployment. And it's you can't anticipate it like that. Yeah. So he would start visualizing it as that bubble, and then you get ready, you go into the bubble, you do what you need to do, you burst it.
And it's done.
And he says, but then you get that shot of adrenaline once you burst that bubble.
Or even as you're approaching it as well, too.
Yeah.
It sounds very familiar to even just the talk and the ideas of saying to yourself, if there's nothing that you can't control, stop worrying about it, because worrying about it is not going to do anything. So once you get to the situation, then you deal with it. Very stoic, I think is what it is, right?
Yes, it is.
You're very calmly and rationally and logically say, these are the things that are going to happen. Yeah. I do what I can do to prepare for it as much as I can.
Yes.
And then when the situation comes, I'm calm, cool, collected, so I can use my faculties to be able to solve that problem or whatever. Yeah. And, break through the fears and what have you. And yeah.
And he even,
very interesting.
And he even says we might get to it later, but he even says, if you go to the bubble, it's you either have to be ready and go in and be decisive in your actions, or you get to the bubble, you realize, no, I'm not ready. No,
it's too much.
And you back away and sort yourself out and then reattempt.
Right.
He said the worst thing is when you go into the bubble and you're just I don't know what I want to do.
Oh, that's the worst.
Because then you just kind of stay in the bubble. You're not making a decision. You don't commit. And that's when it's bad. And that's when it weighs down on you.
What I really think about this is where you really... where you're really putting yourself in a life or death situation. It's the free climbers, and Alex is Honnold.
Yeah.
It's the same thing where you have to approach a move. You have to know without a doubt that you can do the move and do it confidently. Yeah. Because if you're going to do it half-assed,
you're going to hesitate.
You're not going to do it properly, and then you're just going to slip and fall. And one mistake is death. Instant death.
Instant death.
Right? So that's
You have to be decisive.
You have to be decisive. And then also what he did, he trained for years to climb it, right? So it's not like you go in firsthand and just be reckless, right? So a way to alleviate that fear and to be confident and to be able to just go ahead and do it is through rigorous training and discipline, right?
Yep, so absolutely. Absolutely.
And again, Chris Hadfield is another excellent example about that, where he always talks about, excuse me, where he always talks about being prepared and training and just constant training for rigor, so that when you're in a life and death situation, like when he talks about being blind in space, totally cool, calm, and collected, right? Because you have to be, because your life depends on it.
Yeah. And so he says, living in fear is corrosive. You okay over there?
Yeah, sorry. I just have this.
Do you want a lozenge? I can get you a lozenge.
I don't know what that means.
Like a little, like a cough drop. No? You good? Okay.
No, I'm okay. Keep going.
Okay, so he says, living in fear is corrosive. It creates negativity that spreads throughout a whole life and actually changes the way you perceive reality. It creates a victim mindset.
No,
there we go.
This is a common theme into a lot of these books. This is really fascinating because I know before we started reading these books and talking about them that we're always talking about society too, and like doing our little commentary. It's like, why is everyone playing the victim? It's like, oh, it's poor me, this about that. It's like, why aren't people taking control? And then you see all these people that are doing all these extraordinary things, and a common thread is that they're choosing not to be a victim and pulling themselves out and achieving extraordinary things.
Exactly.
So like this narrative of the system being against you, or our institutions are holding blah blah, all this bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's what are you going to do for yourself to prop yourself up? Of course, there's people that are dealt shitty hands and all that kind of stuff too, right?
About those people. Yeah, of course. No, and that's a different situation.
Very interesting.
So he decides he's going to do this. He tells the producer of his SAS, Who Dares Win show, that he's going to do this, and the guy's like, "Well,
like climb Mount Everest."
Yeah,
and this is when he's still in Britain.
Yeah, and so the producer's like, "Well, why don't we'll film it, and we'll pay for it, because obviously it's really expensive."
Film him
going up, and so, but he's just like, "Well, here's the thing though, like he's like, I don't want to do like the typical like guided tour up Mount Everest. Like I want like the least amount of support possible. I just want like one other Sherpa and maybe one other guy to film it and a GoPro, and like that's fucking it."
Right.
And so because he wants this experience, and that also reminded me of like things with Alex Honnold. If you watched Free Solo, and even the other one, I don't think you've watched it, The Alpinist. It's like Free Solo, except it's fucking ice that he's climbing.
Yeah, no, I haven't seen that one.
You have to watch it because it's amazing. But it's like they want to have this like specific experience of doing these extreme things, and it's with the less amount of people possible.
Yeah.
So that's what reminded me.
Cameras really, it takes you out of the situation.
Take you out of the moment. And he talks about that a lot.
And I know for us too, we're thinking like, oh, all this cool stuff we want to do. It's like, oh, well, we're doing this podcast and stuff. Why don't we start filming stuff? It's like the minute you try to bring cameras, it's like, well, I can't actually be in the moment if I have to set up the cameras and whatever. I know. So there's a balancing act.
And that's the thing is like often, like I know you get pissed sometimes if I'm off with the kids on my own and I don't answer the phone, but it's like I never have my phone out or on. Like I have it in my backpack, but that's in case. And I know why phone, like,
but that's different though. I rarely call you. It's because I really need to talk to you.
I know, but like, but I guess like my point is I don't usually take my phone out because I want to stay in the moment with the kids.
For sure.
And I fucking hate seeing other people on their phones.
Just
like
constantly.
Be with your kids and be in the moment. So I'm not saying I'm perfect, but I don't know. So anyways.
That's exactly what you're saying.
So he gets to Nepal and he meets Ed, the camera guy who's gonna film him. And
okay, this is going to be a relevant piece of information that this guy's name is Ed?
Yeah. Well, just this guy whose name is Ed. And so he's summited 3 times before. And
the cameraman.
The cameraman, yep. And he also meets his Sherpa. His name's Dawa, and so.
So this guy, is this like his job? I just film people climbing up and down Everest.
He's just like no. He's just like I think an adventure guy that just is also like a cameraman kind of thing.
Kind of like the guy that filmed Alex's Free Solo thing. Like he's a really good climber, but he also so that's how he gets all those
amazing shots.
Yeah.
So I'd
love to do that. That'd be really cool.
I know. It would be cool. So he kind of, it's almost like him and this Ed are like constantly up the mountain, or kind of having like a dick measuring contest almost. You can tell like they're, and he says in the book, like, we're both alphas. And so there's a couple times where they're kind of butting heads a little bit. And there's that
him
like
and the
alpha
camera guy.
Yeah.
But it's like, you're hired to be the camera guy though. So like, why don't you just
And so, but I think it's
stay
part
back
of,
a bit.
but I think it's part of like Aunt Middleton's kind of like
his personality
as well. So that was kind of interesting, that kind of little take in it.
So did they actually fight?
No, they don't actually fight, but it's like they, it's kind of like maybe like little digs back and forth, or Ed kind of like not undermines, but like questions, like, and you'll see why. Like, I don't blame him for questioning a couple of his decisions going up the mountain. So, but anyways, it's just an interesting dynamic that happens. Mm-hmm. So, what is he? But his big thing is he really wants to have like this experiences and be like really like immerse himself in like the Sherpa culture, because obviously they're the people that know what they're doing up there. So what am I gonna say here? So then he talks, and the book's really cool because it kind of goes back between like what's happening on Everest and then stuff with fear. Mm-hmm. So he's saying, when you let fear overwhelm you, it's as if the whole world rearranges itself in opposition to you. It feels like you're utterly surrounded by traps and enemies, as though the purpose of the universe itself is to take you down. It feels personal. And so he talks about people having a default mindset and having like a default mindset of fear, and that things are against you. And he doesn't come out and say it, but I think the reason we have it is because it's in order to protect ourselves. Sure. Right. Yep. So, and then, so he goes into a story about his brother and how his older brother, like his mom like really enabled this older brother and really coddled him for some reason after the dad's death. And he says her coddling of him confirmed his worst fears. The world was full of danger and it was impossible for him to survive in it without heavy protection. And so her protectiveness around this oldest brother like really led to a bunch of family friction. And so Aunt had to like support him on multiple occasions, like monetarily, and it even drove like a wedge between Aunt and his wife, because they had like no money to pay their own bills, and they're paying this other guy's bills. So eventually he got to the point where he's like this, he's a victim, like he's playing the victim card time and time again, and I'm enabling it. So he just gave that as an example of what not to do as a parent.
Yeah.
So
we've talked so much about this, you and I, about parenting, and it comes from a good place where parents obviously want to protect their kids, but it comes to a point where you're actually doing them more harm.
Yes.
Because you're shielding them from what the real world is like. And unfortunately, the real world is like, it's competitive. You got to compete. You have to be able to put your best foot forward. You don't, life is hard.
Yes.
Life can be a bitch. And if you're not prepared for it, and you always think that someone's going to kind of run and save you, you're going to be in for a very, very rude awakening.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem with a lot of kids growing up these days, kids or young adults now, is that they've never experienced any real hardships or any trials and tribulations, right?
Well, and it goes to, it's like, and we'll get here, but he says, and I'll tell you why he says this, but he says, in today's culture, if a person feels harmed, they are harmed.
Yeah, I don't even want to get into this kind of stuff, conversations, because it's like the whole thing that Ben Shapiro coined, facts don't care about your feelings. This whole idea that we have to validate other people's perceptions of themselves and the world.
Yeah.
It completely undermines our whole reality of what is actually the truth.
Yes.
There used to be a thing where something is the truth. But now it's like, we just have to validate everyone's feelings.
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me. And the most insane thing of it all is if you look in certain schools, where if kids are going, I identify or I feel like I'm a cat, and they're in class and they're like meowing and purring like an actual animal, the teacher has to validate that. That is insane.
Yes.
Why are we validating things that are clearly not reality? No. So, and then there's no grasp on the world. And how are you going to function when your reality or what you're thinking of how the world has no bearing in how things are actually working?
Well, and the reason why he brought that up was because when he assaulted the police officer, he did end up it was like assault with bodily harm, and he did end up hurting that police officer. But then the other police officer was there. He didn't touch that police officer, but he was still charged with assault on that police officer because she felt that her safety was under threat. So he was charged with assault of her, even though he did not lay hands on her.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe can I ask you why he got into a fight with these cops?
He didn't get into it. He didn't get into what actually happened, and I don't know, maybe that's in his book, First Man In, like his autobiography. Maybe he gets into it more in depth in there. I think it was probably like he was just drunk or something, and they were gonna try and charge him or get him to the drunk tank. Like, I don't know. That's what I would assume, but I don't know.
Oh.
But
either way, so he got charged, and he actually lost that. Did he like go to court for that or whatever? He tried to get that charge dropped.
But this is the other thing: is his lawyer was like, we'll just say you have PTSD, and then like.
And he's like, no, I'm not gonna lie.
And that's what he said. He's like, I know, I'm taking responsibility for my actions here. Like, I did this. I need to pay for it, kind of thing. So, but it's not. It doesn't make it okay that the other officer said, oh, well, you need to charge him with assault because I felt like I was in danger.
That makes no sense.
It makes no sense. He did not assault you. That is not assault.
Could you imagine if I go to work and say, well, I feel like I should get paid twice as much and I feel like I need a $50,000 bonus. Oh, okay. Well, since you feel that way, here you go. Like, it doesn't fit with reality.
Yeah.
Like, when you try to apply it to other aspects of society, it completely breaks down. So why do these things... why are they allowed to take place? You know, and it's always around the area of, you know, violence, gender, and all these basically progressive movements that are happening.
Yes.
You know, and it's like you have to validate it. And
well, and then he talks about it's that person's, it's your own issues, and you're projecting that on other people. And he says, like, negative people globalize their negativity because they want to assure themselves that the problem isn't their own lack of courage. Right? It's everyone and everything else. It's not them. It's not taking that deep hard look into themselves. Right? Yeah,
you hit the nail on the head there. It's never me. There's nothing wrong with me. It's the whole world that needs to change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he says people see what he's been through and they can't believe, like, he's a happy guy. Like, he's been through, you know, war and all this stuff. And so, they almost take it as like an insult. Like,
of course it is.
And so he says, we're constantly given this message that it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah. And it's not.
And it's
not okay.
Not.
Try to fucking better yourself.
Yeah.
You know, and it's like therapists or psychiatry now. It's like it used to be you would go see someone to talk through your issues and not to get those issues validated, but find out what the root causes of the issues so you can fix yourself and be better.
Be a better person.
But now it's not. It's like you go to the therapy, it'd be like, oh, well, I feel this. They're like, oh, you do? Well, then that's fantastic. Let's validate that and push it through. And like, we can't, you know, it's unbelievable that people cannot look from within. And try to want to better themselves.
Yeah. And yet with the kid stuff, it's like, he says, like, eradicating that conflict and pain, it's a disservice to our kids because it's the only way they can understand how to deal with it in a healthy way is to experience it.
Yep.
And as much as parents as we don't want to see our kids having to go through conflict, having to go through pain, that's just life.
Yep.
And if you deal with the little things, you build up your confidence that you can deal with shit.
Exactly.
Then when the big shit happens, you're going to be okay.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like training for life.
Yeah.
It's like when your kids are in the playground and there's like some type of bully going on. I think of like a really small, they're going down the slide, somebody's pushing or like, oh, I'm going to go down. And so a lot of parents will just jump right in.
Yes.
Be like, oh, you can't, Johnny, you can't do this or blah, 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 whatever it is. It's like, no, just take a step back. Let the kids figure out how the dynamics of the social structures work so they can kind of figure out their place and figure out how things work. Because you got to let them figure that out. Because all these kids that have always had their parents fight their playground battles, well, what are they going to do when it's not in the playground anymore, but it's in the schools or it's in the workplace? Yep. They're not going to know how to handle this.
No, and then you get anxiety.
Oh, yeah.
This is where anxiety comes in and depression comes in.
And just basic mental unstableness.
Exactly.
Yep.
So he says
But don't worry. The pharmaceutical company is here to fix everything.
Yeah. So he talks, I just wanted to talk a little bit. This isn't necessarily about fear, but about dealing with negative events. And I think this is really important because he says that he has 3 steps. So the first one is to acknowledge. So accept what's happened, feel your feeling. This is what I always say. Yep. Feel your feeling, be brutally honest about it. And then process it, understand what the problem is and what it is not, which I think is really, really important because our default, like he calls it like our default mindset, wants to catastrophize it. I didn't say that word right, but wants to catastrophize it, make it everything worse than it is. Yeah. But that doesn't help. It's
literally the world is coming to an end.
It doesn't help you.
Yep.
So take responsibility and then ask what you're going to do and then move on.
Yep.
And like, that's it. Like, and yep. but by doing that, it allows you to feel like an active part in like making it better. And the one thing he talks about as well is like once you're able to master fear, then you have this like responsibility. He calls it like a godlike responsibility, but he says
to yourself.
And like what he says is like, so say you get like, you're going out at the bar and you leave at like 4:00 in the morning or something and you get jumped in the alley. Well, maybe that's not your fault. And maybe that's not like, but make it your problem. Like, how can you solve that problem so it doesn't happen another time? So, well, what were you doing out at the bar that late? What were you doing out there by yourself? Do you need to maybe go and take some self-defense lessons, like learn some jujitsu or something like that? So don't make it your fault, but like make it your problem to solve. Right. Like,
That's a really good example. And I'm going to give another example, which is a very, very common example. So, a woman who's dressing super scantily clad, or even like a teenage girl or whatever, right? Mm-hmm. They're wearing just like basically almost like a bra and a thong, or they're just going out in town, right? Mm-hmm. Obviously, no matter what someone wears, that does not give you the right in any way to do any kind of advancements or whatever, right?
No.
But then if something happens, you're walking down Saturday night, midnight or whatever after the club, and you're dressed whatever certain way, and then something happens, horrible, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, you got to ask yourself, what position are you putting yourself in that could possibly have avoided that?
Yes.
Again, everyone could do whatever it is that they want to do, right? If I'm going to be an idiot and start running across the streets and the highways, at night or whatever, I'd be like, okay, like if I get run over, why were you doing that in the first place? I don't know. That's a really bad example. I can't really think of anything off the top of my head.
But it's like, it's not your fault. It's not your fault that it's happening, but you can make it your problem so that it doesn't happen again.
Exactly.
You can like reverse and look at it. And I think that's just about taking a step back and always reflecting on negative situations and figuring out how to move forward from it and not playing that victim role, right? Again, it goes back to that.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. So he talks about...
That's so hard for people to do. It's so hard for people to do, to take a step back and be like...
I think even...
Especially when things aren't your problem. We've had so many things that happen that, it wasn't our problem. Like our RV thing.
Oh my God.
Right?
It wasn't our fault.
It wasn't our fault. But I'm like, you know what? Look at all the things that we did. We didn't get any advice from anybody who knows anything about RVs. We didn't do our due diligence. We bought basically the first thing that we came up with. We didn't even know how to look for mechanics, all these kinds of things. And then a mechanic stole all of our money. And it's like, that's not our fault, but all these decisions that we made that were poor led up to it. And it's that self-reflection that gets to the point like, you know what, that's never going to happen again because we learned our lesson, whatever, right? Because if you don't learn your lesson, then you could do it all over again. We're going to make different mistakes
next time,
but they're not going to be the same mistakes, right? So
so he talks about kind of getting to base camp, and he's like, or even just like the trek to base camp, he gets pissed because there's so many people and it's like all tourists, and this is not what he wants at all. So Dawa is actually really awesome and takes him off like another route. It takes them longer to get to base camp, but it's like not crowded. It's like where nobody goes. But
is it still like snowy and walking mountainy hiking to get there?
It's like mountainy. Like I think it's pretty rugged, but it's not. I don't think it's snowy because it's like in April, right?
No, I don't know. I have no idea.
It's April. in Nepal. So
yeah, so it's just like taking a hike in a
yeah,
foresty, but
I think it's still pretty rugged. Yeah.
But so I mean foresty, but not foresty, but it's mountainy.
Yeah.
Like going for a hike on a side of a mountain.
Yeah. So then he talks about getting to base camp, and one of the teammates that's a part of it, his expedition that he's a part of.
There's only 3 of them.
Well, there's only 3 of them, and they only really stick together. But he's part of like that, like a bigger, like one of those expeditions that gets all your logistics and stuff ready.
Like the book we read there.
Yeah, exactly. But he doesn't really. They don't really associate with them at all.
Yeah.
But one of the people on that expedition because they're all in kind of their tent area together, right? Because they all share like the same, like the common like food tent or whatever kind of thing.
That's all provided by the company or whatever.
Yeah. So he talks about one of the guys and he calls him Ferris, and Ferris is like a millionaire. And so he's talking about that, like he has like all this ridiculous stuff that he's taking to base camp, that he's like yelling at the Sherpas to make sure they're careful with that bag when they get it up to base camp. This guy's such a dick. And so he has this total victim mentality that everybody should accommodate him, and basically like, well, I paid for it, so therefore I deserve it, and you need to do what I want. And so it's like he talks about.
Does he make a list of who he thinks is going to die that season on top of the hill? Like that guy's number one.
Looks at, it's interesting. So I thought that was interesting. So then he talks about the fear. He talks about a few different types of fear, and like our fear of suffering, and how our fear of suffering comes from like our experiences and having experienced suffering before, and then our imagination adds to that about like what could possibly happen. And so he says, like, what you can do is like understand that fear of suffering, it's your body getting ready and preparing you. So everything that your body does to make you fear is to prepare you to do whatever action it is, kind of thing. And I really like that, because that's how I approach things. If I can't control them, is like, okay, I need to know why this is happening. And so it's like I research out of control. Well, you know how I do. So, you know, all the library books in this house about all the different things. So I really liked that. So he says, once you've geared yourself up, felt the fear, and redefined it as get ready, the next step is to commit to your action with the word go. So again, go, be decisive, confident that you can go ahead and do it. So and he says, like, once you train yourself to experience fear as your body getting ready, then you can begin to harness that energy and to push you forward and to get done what you need to get done. So so then they go through the Icefall, and he's like pushing them pretty hard to get through like the different stages.
Sorry, who's they?
So him and like the camera guy and his Sherpa Dawa.
Yeah.
So he's pushing them pretty hard. So they go
pushing his group.
Yeah. So he puts like try to get through the Icefall fast. And so they get through the Icefall. 10 minutes after they get through, there's like a huge avalanche. And so this Ed guy wants to get him on camera, like, oh, we were just there 10 minutes ago and we would have been dead basically if we had, if the avalanche had happened. But he doesn't want to think about like that negativity. Because he's like, don't think about what could have happened or what should have happened. Don't be guided like that. Be careful of that voice in your head. Think about reality. And the reality is we were fine.
Yeah.
And I really liked that as well. No big deal. And like they even did a thing where they had like a minute of silence at base camp before people started trekking up for the people that had died in the avalanche like 2 years earlier. And he's like, I was there, but he's just like, I don't want that negativity on me. And he's like, I get it. You want a moment of silence, but he's like, then it's just a reminder, and it just feeds into that fear feeling. And I was like, oh, I didn't think about it in those terms.
It is really
but
interesting.
It is really interesting. Yeah.
Especially for like, a war veteran or whatever. Like, so how would you feel about having moments of silences for, Remembrance Day or whatever? Would it be?
So I think that would be different, right? Because you're not in a situation where then you have to actually go into the fear bubble.
What they just did, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, oh, we're about to storm the lines. I just think of like the old, trench warfare or whatever. They're like, oh, let's have a moment of silence for all the people that died before us because we're about to do the same thing. Hey, no, that makes sense.
So it made sense to me. So he talks then about the fear of failure and how.
Oh, that's a big one.
That's a big one. And how it will keep you in your comfort zone, and then just being afraid of what other people are going to say if you fail. And again, I think that goes to, the book with like The Art of Asking, about being vulnerable and like being vulnerable enough to try something and fail. And even like our trip, like, maybe it was a big flying failure, but like, at least we tried.
Yep.
Like, we put that out there. And he says some people, I really thought this was interesting too. He said some people are motivated by ego about something, like bragging rights, and that's why like most of these people are on the mountain, right?
They're there for the wrong reasons.
They're there to say that they got to the top, and he says like that's the external motivation, whereas if you do things for pride, that's that internal motivation, and that's a better reason to be motivated to do something.
Those are the people that have the egos or whatever, they're the ones that typically end up failing.
Yes.
And I'm sure we'll talk about...
And then blaming everybody.
Well, yeah. I'm sure we'll talk about this book at some point. But David Goggins' book.
Yes.
Was it Can't Hurt Me?
Yeah.
He talks about all the people that go through Hell Week for getting into the Navy SEALs. And, you know, he's like, you have the jocks and the super athletes or whatever. He's like, those guys are always the first guys to quit, because those are not the people that end up making it. It's the people that want it, that have that team mindset, and that brotherhood mindset, and that are strong in the mind to be able to take that punishment and what have you. It's not that, hey, I'm the big strong guy, look at me, I'm going to do this because I'm, you know, big and macho or whatever. It's like, no, that's not what it takes.
And one thing he says too is if you fail at something, and if, you know, it bruises, or if you don't do something because you're afraid of what people are going to say, it's like you're putting your entire self-worth in the hands of
other people,
of not only other people, but in one very small event in your life. And that's you're putting the control of your life in someone else's hands, which I don't think people really understand that. No. And I don't know. I think that's an important
That's a hard concept to grasp.
It really is.
It's even a hard concept to grasp, especially for children, because we see that sometimes with the kids, you know, especially when you're a teenager. I mean, the whole thing about that is just you're super self-conscious because you're going through all these changes or whatever. Yeah. you're going to have some changes, and this is, you know, whatever, right? Yeah. That it's just like, you just can't help but feel super self-conscious because you're like, you know, are they going to see my pimples or this or that or whatever? It's like, it's just, you know, we've all been there. It's a hard time going through that transition. But you know what I mean? So it's difficult, but it's something that at least we try to balance anyways when we're teaching our kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. So they do their first rotation up the mountain. So I don't know if you remember from when we talked about the 96 strategy, they're doing like a bunch of different rotations, right? So you're going up the mountain to one camp, then you're coming back down, then you're going up to the next camp, and you're coming back down. Yeah. So he's like,
just to assimilate, acclimate yourself to the...
like, I don't think I need that.
I'm just going to go.
So they go up the Icefall. They get to like...
Because Icefall is between 1 and 2, right?
The Icefall's at the very beginning. The Icefall is like, there's base camp, then the Icefall, then camp 1, then camp 2, camp 3, camp 4.
Oh, right. Base camp. That's what I meant. Base camp, I think is 1. Okay. But there's base camp and camp 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what they do. And then he pushes them, like he pushes hard, and he gets them to camp 3 in like that one kind of rotation. I don't know how many days it takes them, but
that was going to be my question. How long does it take to get from...
It was like a couple days. And so they get to camp 3, and then, which typically you don't do. You just only go to camp 1 and you come back down, then you go to camp 2.
Why would you go to camp 1 and then go back through the ice falls and then go back again? Because that's dangerous.
Yeah, but that's what it is to be. Some people just need to be acclimated that way.
But can't you just be acclimated by just staying at camp 2 for that duration of time?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's just too hard on the body that some people just can't withstand staying there for too long. I don't know.
That's weird.
Anyways.
Because I would want to do training even before I get there. Like climb other mountains to get used to higher altitude. But anyways, that's how I would do it. Wouldn't just be a rich guy just paying somebody to carry all my shit for me up the mountain.
So anyways, so he pushes them and they get all the way to camp 3 in their first cycle.
So then they all die because they can't breathe.
So they come back down the mountain. They come into the mountain. He's like,
I'm going to stay.
I'm done. Like, I'm done. I don't need to do any more rotations. Like, the next time I go up there, it's my summit push. Like, that's what's going to happen. So he's like, they're waiting for a window, like a weather window. And the lines, like the rope lines, have not yet been fixed by the Sherpas from like Camp 4 to the top at this point. Yep. And because the weather's...
He's got to wait for that.
He's got to wait for that. So he's like, it's probably going to be about a week. And so he's like, well... I'm just gonna go back down to one of the towns that they trekked by called Namanchi Bazaar, and I'm just gonna rest up instead of doing another. So he's gonna go down and spend a few days there and just like hang out.
Like, where's this town?
So it's down the mountain. So
all the way down.
Yeah, so
That's
he takes it. So he
spent.
Yes, so he pays money to get a helicopter to take him down there.
Oh, a helicopter.
Yes.
So he doesn't climb down?
No.
What the hell is this?
I know.
What are you doing?
I don't know. And so this
It's
is
I'm just gonna go for a spa.
So then Ed kind of questions him. Was like, "What the fuck are you doing? Like, people don't do this. Like, what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, I'm fine. I'm just gonna go down. I think if I can get, because you can't. It's hard to sleep and it's hard to eat when you're on the mountain. So he's like, I'm just gonna go down there and rest up. I'm gonna try to get some good sleep, and I'm gonna try to like eat something while I'm down there, and then when I come back, then we'll go to the top." It's like, what the fuck, guy?
Yeah, it's
kind of crazy. And then when he's down there for 4 days. He spends all 4 days in a pub and just drinking until like 4 o'clock in the morning. And so it's just like, really? That part I was just kind of like pissed about, because I was like, I don't get it.
That's not climbing the mountain.
I know. So I don't know what that was about.
Does he get helicoptered back to
I don't know. He didn't say.
Or does he climb back up?
I would assume he would climb back up.
I would know. I would assume he's going to helicopter back up.
I don't know. So I just thought that was like an interesting piece in there. I just shows this guy he's pretty cocky, I think.
Yeah. You think? That's just weird.
Yeah, that's what I was like. I've never trust me. I've read a ton of Everest books. I've never heard of anybody doing this. I don't know if it's common, but I've never heard of it before.
I don't think it's common.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that.
I know, neither did I.
I don't know. Well, let's continue on with the story.
So the next type of fear he talks about is the fear, and this one, oh geez, this one hit me hard. The fear of conflict and of people not liking them. It's the one thing you better know about me. I'm a people pleaser.
Oh yeah. Well, there you go. Don't box yourself into these these corners.
So he talks about, the fear of criticism. And he says maybe it's because people have like a diluted self-image of themselves. But it's one thing he says is like, nothing anyone else can say is worse than what you've already said to yourself.
No,
and
that's
like,
true.
It's so true, because I don't know if everyone's like this. I'm sure most people are, but like, you're your own worst critic, like 100%. And he says
except for maybe people that are narcissistic.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking. Right, that type of, but then he said, once you stop trying to please everyone all the time, you become free.
Yep.
And I wrote beside this, oof, I felt that one.
Yeah.
Because I have a hard time with that for sure. And he says, strive to have the courage to make plain spoken truth a higher priority than your own popularity. This is why he's so critical of the extreme politically correct turn that society seems to have taken. We succeed as a species when you feel free to speak honestly, respectfully, and directly to each other. Different kinds of people get together, share their different beliefs, experiences, debate them, and take what's best and discard the rest. And that's how we progress.
Yep, absolutely.
And so, that one, it's like, that's exactly.
Like number one, that's how innovation happens.
Exactly.
In any kind of tech space or whatever it is. It's like you get a bunch of people together. Like, what's the best way that we can build a rocket, build an electric car, whatever the hell it is? How can we best build that? And someone's going to come with this, oh, that's stupid, whatever. And then at the end of the day, all the shitty ideas are going to get tossed away, and then you're going to left with the good ideas. Yeah. And that's what pushes things forward.
Exactly.
But then when all of a sudden it's like, well, I have this idea. Shut up. You can't say that. That's racist or whatever it is. You're done. You can't talk at all. And then all of a sudden you get to this point where the society is like, only these specific types of conversations are acceptable. Everything else is not true. And then it's just...
Or even only the people with these experiences. So then you're leaving out other experiences that might be very applicable to what you're trying to solve.
Yeah. But that's even worse too, for saying like, in today's society where like, in order for you to be able to talk about racism, you have to be of a specific race yourself. It's like, that's not true. Mm-hmm. That's not true at all. Yeah. Anybody can speak to anything. I have never been a slave. You have never been a slave. Yeah. But I'm sure we can speak to the fact that slavery is not good, and that it's bad. Yeah. You don't have to be a slave, just like all this talk, it's just getting a little bit too much into stuff. But, the idea of like, especially in North America, like, only black people or only indigenous people can talk about racism. If you're white, you're not allowed to talk. Like that, no, I don't care what color of skin you have. What it is, like what racism is, or somebody is discriminating against somebody based on their physical characteristic.
Yeah.
You know what that is, and you can speak to it no matter what you look like. I don't care. You don't have to have a certain set of criteria before you're allowed to speak.
Well,
completely bonkers.
So let me tell you, because I'm not saying this to prop myself up, but I know I look young. I look very young, and I don't do anything. I just look young. So when I go out with the kids,
I don't need to prop myself up, but damn.
No, that's not what that's not what I'm saying. I'm not like that.
I know.
But it's like when I go out with the kids, the way people treat me, because obviously the kids are taller than me now.
Yeah, that's funny.
We just look like a group of 3 teenagers. They treat, especially if like from far, right? And because I always have like my backpack on too.
I understand.
People treat us like shit. They do not treat you like an actual real person.
Like who? And like
cashiers at Sobeys will treat me like shit until they realize, oh, you're the mom. And then you see a flip, and then they're very respectful to me. But even I remember another example. Like I was pregnant with Maya, very pregnant with Maya, and I was pushing Tristan in the stroller, and there was 2 Jehovah's Witnesses ladies knocking on doors within the neighborhood, and they just looked at me with pity and a little bit of disgust as, oh, look at this poor teenage mom. Here she is having another one. She's probably not married. And it's just like, bitch.
Yeah. I mean,
so I know it's like that. I'm just saying there are different types of discrimination, and it's not a good way to feel regardless. And so everyone has their own experiences.
Yeah.
So
yeah, but I mean that kind of stuff too is like, as a person, you just have to. People are going to think what they want to think, and I'm just going to go about my daily life.
100%.
Yeah. So,
and I'm not trying to compare that to like hardcore deep South racism.
Whatever.
Like 100% not. I'm just saying everyone can have.
Even then, that's a thing too. That it's like deep South. It's like, no, you know what? That's what I used to always think as well too.
Yeah.
But now looking at it, if I had to move somewhere, Texas and Florida, those are the places that I'm going to want to go. You know, like, do I want to go live in California or New York? Fuck, hell no.
Hell no.
Right? Because these places are so quote unquote progressive. Like, no, thank you. Those places sound like just a cesspool.
Yeah.
Of just toxic people. So, you got to analyze all the things that you think you've heard or think you've known. And the only way that you're going to get to figure out the truth of what actually is reality is to allow everyone to talk and have open and honest conversations. That's the only way.
It's the only way forward. Yeah.
So anyways.
So back to the mountain. Weather's not great when he gets back, but he's like, well, I don't care. We're still going to go because I want to get up ahead of all these noobs, because he knows that there is going to be lineups, and he doesn't want to be behind these, because he's seen it as the first time they went up, and even within camp, he sees these idiots that just don't know what they're doing.
Oh, of course.
Right? And he doesn't want to be behind those guys.
That's
it's just
dangerous.
like when you're driving, right? You don't want to be behind a guy that's like swerving
you're
around.
Like,
right?
I got to pass this asshole.
Yeah, exactly. So then Ed kind of pokes and prods at him and says, well, have you thought about doing it without oxygen? Like, have you thought about getting to the top without oxygen? So he kind of needles him and keeps needling him all the way up the mountain. Like, why don't you try without oxygen? And so he's thinking about it. But then he realizes, if I did do it without oxygen, then I'm giving into ego and I'm not moving forward. Like, just to say I did it, right? And he's like, I know it's probably not safe for me to not go with oxygen. So he decides to go with oxygen. So they go up. And
that's going with oxygen just on the one day, the summit day, right?
Yeah.
Because do people wear oxygen any other time, or is it just only at that?
I think it depends. I think it depends what their comfort level is, and then how much money you have too, because that's not cheap, right? Yeah. So they decide to go up. Like they have their summit day. He decides to go with oxygen, and the weather looks good for their summit push. They get to the top, and then the snow starts flying, and it starts to become like blizzard conditions. It starts to get bad. There's people that have come up, and then they've done their thing, taken their picture, and then they start to go down. And they've gotten up there basically kind of first. And so, but he's like, he waits for the other people to leave because he just wants that moment on the top by himself.
So he gets to the top, and he's on there for like a long time.
Well, I don't think it's that long, but he waits. He waits is the point. He waits for other people to.
Because usually people go to the top. It's like 2 minutes, right?
Long. Yeah.
Because they're like, I can't even enjoy this because I'm like all hallucinating or whatever the hell it is, right?
He wants a moment on top by himself on top of this mountain. So then he comes to regret this decision because, of course, you get to the point called the Hillary step where you have to go on the lines and it's a 1-by-1 type deal that you have to go down. And yeah, he ends up waiting there for 2.5 hours to get down. And he's like, yeah, I knew I made a huge mistake.
Because all the people he let go in front of him, he had to wait for them.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's the people, it was like a shit show. These people like going down, people were like getting all tangled in the lines. One guy like almost died and flew off the mount. Like it was just stupid. And so basically like they almost die. He finally gets to Camp 4. Ed had gotten down to Camp 4
probably hours before.
Yeah. And he's like, oh, we thought you were dead. Basically.
Yeah.
And he ends up like his corneas get scratched from the snow because it's like a blizzard coming down.
Don't they wear goggles though?
They do, but I don't know. I don't know.
Must have left them in his helicopter or back in his pub.
Seriously. Yeah. So anyway, so then he gets down and it's all good. So the last fear he talks about is the one fear that drives all other fears for people. And that's just that internal fear of like not being good enough. Mm-hmm. And so he says all fear comes from not having sufficient trust in yourself.
Yeah.
And so, and I think that's really, really true. And he says, this comes from everyone telling us to be careful. Helicopter parenting is creating a generation of fearful, negative people. I know.
You should listen to what you're saying.
I know.
Oh, are you guys going for a walk? Oh, be safe. Be careful. I was like, Jesus Christ.
I understand. I understand. And so he says to combat this, which is something we've talked about before, is put yourself on like a daily program of like proving that you're good enough. And so he says each tiny victory is another fuck you to that negative chatter in my head. If the default mindset is you're not good enough, the positive mindset is I'm better than I was yesterday.
Right.
And so for me, like, I always like get a little bit nervous when I go on my sprint runs, but every time like I do it, it builds that confidence that, yeah, you can do this. Like you have the capacity. And so you build that confidence that, yeah, you're getting better every day and you can do it. So, and I think it goes a lot to like stuff like with Jordan Peterson says, like, just like clean your room, make your bed, you know, like those little things, little wins.
That's why one of the like when you go to the army or whatever, that's one of the things they do is just the discipline, you know. You have to make sure everything's clean, your bunk and all that kind of stuff. How much of, you know, being fearful or being self-critical of yourself or thinking you're not good enough in your life, how much do you think of all of this stuff has to do with people not having direction or purpose in life?
I think that's a different thing.
Do you?
I really do. I think if you I think that's a different thing.
Okay.
Yeah. I think if you have purpose, then maybe you're afraid that you're not going to be good enough to get that goal or hit that goal, and that's that fear. But I think finding what your purpose is, I think that's a different thing.
I'm not talking so much about finding it, because if you have purpose, you have that fulfillment and you almost know who you are and you know what you have to do and you just go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're aimless, then I think that compounds to the problem of not thinking you're good enough because you're like, what am I even doing here?
That's true. No, I can see that. I can see that for sure.
I'm just thinking from my perspective, from my point of view, is I don't have a fear of like failure and failing because I failed so many times. It's like, okay, well, you know, just chalk it up as another defeat and then brush yourself off and learn from it and keep going. But I know I have a big problem with trying to figure out what my purpose is and what my drive is. And it doesn't make me self-doubt myself, but it makes me, I don't know, almost fearful in a way that like, I don't know if this is the thing for me, and that it almost stops me from doing things. Because it's like, I just don't know. I don't know. It's
like the fear of the unknown of what if I choose this path, but figure out I don't like it and I don't want to do this, or I don't succeed.
Well, no, not even that, because I don't fear not succeeding, because like I said, I've done that so many times. Maybe it's just because, you know, the older you get, it's like, I know I have less and less time on this planet.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know. I just feel like if someone has purpose that a lot of the self-doubt and the negative talk within
100% would go away.
Would just go away.
Yes. Yeah.
Anyways, very interesting.
Very interesting. So that's just about it for the book. Two last little quotes I want to say is, he says, being true to yourself doesn't mean staying the same forever. It means taking what's already there and improving it, which I think is really important, because I think people just think, oh, I'm going to be an adult and then that's it. I'm static. This is how I'm going to be for the rest of your life.
Always evolving, always changing, always growing.
Always grow, always learn.
Yep.
And then he says, how we think defines how we act. How we act defines the events in our lives. And the last one is, your mission is you. As long as you're opening doors, it's mission success. So whether you fail when you open up those doors or not, doesn't matter. You just, at least you did it.
Yeah.
Like you did it. So.
Mission accomplished. I just think of the whole George Bush and the Iraq War. Mission accomplished.
I know.
What did you accomplish here exactly?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So my 3 takeaways.
Okay, got some takeaways.
Were, there's a physiological reason for fear to keep us safe, but in today's world, unless you are a special forces soldier, usually that fear is like irrational, and you can rationalize it.
But do you think there's also that evolutionary push that fear also helps drive that growth, like you were saying, and then that growth makes us evolve into better resilient organisms to be able to handle the environment, right?
Yeah, for sure. Fear puts us in by being to be reactive rather than proactive, and then that can put us into the victim mentality, which is not good. And then the last one is, you need to trust in yourself that you have the capabilities, and don't let anything stop you, especially yourself. And even if you try and fail, it doesn't matter, because all failure is growth. So at the end of the day. So
100%.
Yeah. So that's the book. And so he's written a bunch of different books, and he has actually one for kids.
He has what, sorry?
He has one for kids.
One for kids?
Yeah, like a book for kids.
Oh, one for kids. I thought you meant he had like one for like 14 kids. What are you talking about?
No. He's a book for kids. Yeah.
Does he have any kids himself? Is he married?
Yeah, he's married. He has like one kid from another relationship, and I think either 3 or 4 with his current wife. They're married.
With his current wife.
And he has a book. He has a book coming out in January called The Wall. And it's just all about like different walls that we can hit, either if it's like lack of motivation or leaving our comfort zone. There's always like something, like an obstacle that we need to kind of push through. So that's what that one's about. He has one called mental fitness and like positive. Well, there's one about like positive attitude and that sort of thing. So
what is this guy? Would you say he's kind of like a, I don't want to say self-help, but like a personal growth kind of guy? I would say personal growth, yeah, for like a rich roll kind of thing. And I don't even know how to compare. Because they all, again, a lot of people talk about similar things.
I'd say like more like a motivational guy, because he does do like a lot of like speaking tours as well. Yeah. And I think he even does a bunch of like kind of corporate stuff as well, like helping like different corporations and stuff.
Like, well, just trying to motivate the troops in a way, right?
Exactly. So.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So it was.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was a good book.
Yeah.
I took a lot from it. I haven't read a book like that specifically talks about fear and overcoming fear. So I thought that was a really...
And giving you strategies maybe to use.
Yeah.
Yep.
100%.
Which we've already talked about here.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah.
So then, on a scale of 1 to 10 as just a general book that you would like to read?
I'd give it like an 8.
An 8? Okay. It's not a 10.
It's not 10, but like it was pretty good. And it's a really... like conversational, like how he writes it, like you can tell, like it's not you don't feel like it's
not a heavy read or anything like that.
No, and you don't feel like it's not him writing it, like you feel like how he talks, like he drops F-bombs, and he clearly just doesn't give a fuck, and he knows who he is, and he's gonna say what he thinks.
If you don't like me, then
basically I'm going to move to Australia, so fuck you.
No, but it's like, if you don't like what I say or whatever, then don't listen to me. That's fine. It's not for you, I'm not going to write a book this is geared to 8.7 billion people, or however many people we have on this planet now. It's not going to be for everyone.
And he's able to point out like his faults, like for sure. Like he's, especially taking responsibility for assaulting police officers and not using the PTSD card. Like whether he suffers from PTSD or not, I don't know. But to not feel like he needed to use it.
Right. Especially given what that officer was was like phantom charge.
Yeah.
So I guess the premise of this story is his conquering fear or whatever is going through Mount Everest. So, I mean, the next question I always ask is on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of what you would want to do and how you'd want to, like, would you want to do this in your life, right? So I can't really answer that question.
Well, I can,
but
though.
You can. I was just gonna say, and just in the way about doing things in your life that you are going to put yourself in a position to experience fear or to face your fears maybe and to push through them and learn how to deal with them, whether in his mindset where take it one bubble at a time, right?
So definitely, I mean, I do get, you know this about me, I get really anxious when I have to go places and I don't know necessarily where I'm going, like if I have to take the kids to some sort of appointment or something.
Yeah.
And so,
which is such a
silly thing to be. I don't know why I build it up in mind. It's like I'm not afraid of it. Like I wouldn't call it fear, and I wouldn't call it like anxiety, but like maybe like a little bit of like anxiousness or stress about it.
Like to me, the only way that you're going to get through that is to just keep doing it over and over again.
Well, I know. Well, and like that's the thing is like you desensitize yourself, right? Exactly. If I drove downtown all the time, you wouldn't care. You just get used to it, right? And it wouldn't bother you. So that's one. The other one is, and I don't want you to say what my biggest fear is. I don't want people to know because I just don't like, because then people think they're being funny and do little tricks on you.
Sure.
And I fucking hate that.
Yeah.
But definitely I have a fear that I have to overcome.
Yeah.
And, this puts some things in context for me that I think will be helpful.
You think it'll be helpful?
I think so. I think it'll maybe be helpful, but it's then trying to put myself in situations to overcome that fear, and I'm just like, nah, I'm good.
Well,
I'm good.
Yeah.
So, but definitely it really made me think a lot about that. So yeah. What about you? Any fears you need to overcome? You're not afraid of anything.
I guess if you could say things that I'm afraid of, like it's not like, spiders, whatever. Like I don't like them or whatever, and I don't, whatever. But I'm not gonna like freak out and run away or what have you. So I mean, there's that kind of. I think what really scares me are bigger picture things. Like I'm scared.
Yes.
What's gonna happen if Canada goes on this crazy food shortage? You know what I mean? Yes. I'm like, that's my big fear. It's like, and then like, how am I going to take care and protect my family?
Yes.
Like those are big things that I think about.
Existential fears.
But again, it's not like it's a fear as if I'm like, it's paralyzing me and I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, those things. Yeah. But in terms, there's things that I don't know. I'm not going to say like I'm not afraid of anything, but it's like there's a lot of things that I don't want to do or I wouldn't want to do because it's like unpleasant or it's like it'd be scary for me, Yeah. Like even heights. I don't like heights, but I'll still climb up, the top ropes and all that kind of stuff and looking down and going up hikes and whatever, and you just standing on the edge or whatever. Like I'll still do it, right? Even though I'll get there and I'll feel the butterflies or whatever, right? But I don't know. But yeah, those are the things. The fear. It's those things about protecting the family and all that. Because I'm like, these are the important things that I need to worry about. It's not about if there's any spiders under my bed or whatever.
Zombies.
So
yeah.
So yeah, or like going to a new place or whatever. I was like, just gonna go, and again, like be smart about it, right?
Oh yeah.
Like if someone was like, oh, you just need to hop on a plane and just head over to some remote place in the desert or whatever. I'm like, I'm not really going to be afraid. I'm just going to do the work I need to do to prep for it or whatever. But again, everything is always like, I'm afraid of like, where am I going to poop? That's always, so where am I?
Oh, let's not even talk about toilets. Yeah. Huge toilet issues.
But again, that's not fear.
I was just like, I need to know where I have to go pee because I have to pee all the time.
Yeah.
That's
one of the downfalls of being a woman. You can't just
whip it out
and just go right here. You gotta, just gotta work on your squats, right? That's all there is to it. Yeah.
It's not that easy, but anyway.
What, squatting? That's fine.
Well, that's not, the mechanics are a little bit different, my friend.
I don't know what you guys got going on down there. I don't want to know. It's beyond my realm of understanding.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Anyway,
all right. So
cool.
Good book. Good talk. thanks to everyone for listening and stopping by. We really appreciate it. Check us out, odumanandrea.com.
Yep.
We appreciate your support.
Absolutely.
I think that's it. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to say? Final thoughts? Well, then let's do this.
High five.
Let's do a little high five to seal the deal, as they say.
Oh, yeah. Myself.
Just take it easy with that microphone. You hold it
I
a little too.
I know. Ever so gently.
It's making me feel uneasy. I think.
I think that's just your fear talking.
Yeah, I'm a little intimidated by
okay.
what's going on around here.
Let's move on.
So let's move on. We're done.
We're done.
Thank you for watching.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Yep.
And we'll see you next time.
See you next week.